Chapter 10. October 9th, 1277. Badajoz, Spain. Nighttime. Evening, actually. Maria sat in a chair just outside the front door to her home and gazed at the sky. Crimson, gold, and violet columns of light streaming through an otherwise dark gray sky took shape before her. Yet, the beauty of this open sky, punctuated by the occasional lone sparrowhawk flying by, gave her no consolation. It had been 6 days since she had last seen her boys, and she had all but given up hope she would ever see them alive again. Maria knew how dangerous this land could be. If you were not paying attention, it was easy to get caught under the blistering sun with no provisions and no water. She reminded herself that this time of the year was not necessarily the hottest, but still, something had to have gone terribly wrong. Why else would the boys have disappeared? They weren't the kind of children who disregarded her rules. They were good boys. Maria knew she spent a lot of time with the children at the orphanage, but Hernan and Arturo followed along in their mother's footsteps and even helped where needed. They rarely complained about it. Did she spend too much time with children who weren't her own? Maria was at that dangerous time when thoughts turned inward. All efforts to find the boys were being made. There was nothing else she could do now but think back to the last time she saw them. She had been working in the house all day, cleaning and preparing the evening meal. Although she lived in a simple home with dusty floors, she did her best to keep her lodgings neat and tidy. It was amazing to the rest of her family how she could make a home with dirt floors appear clean. 6 days ago, she had been tending to her chores and duties around the house, when suddenly Hernan and Arturo burst through the door, paying no attention to the havoc they were causing. Throwing their school books and coats down on the first surface they could find, they rushed to the middle of the room and immediately turned their attention to the intrigue of the moment. A small rodent caught on the way home from school. Thinking back on it, Maria berated herself for her reaction, which was swift and decidedly caustic. Realizing their transgression, the boys sputtered apologies and immediately left, presumably to play with their new pet where their antics wouldn't suffer under the blistering derision of their mother. That was the last she had seen them. Her red eyes ached now. When she thought there couldn't possibly be any tears left, more flowed. Diego wasn't home now to assuage her turmoil. Since the day after their disappearance, he never stopped looking for them night and day. He would travel in every direction of the compass, organizing the efforts of several willing participants in the search. Each day he would return only to find the boys still hadn't appeared. And each day he would go out again. Hope was all he had. Hope was all that was left. The very notion of sleep was laughable. It was quiet now, and a gentle breeze coming from the west carried with it the occasional aroma of the flocks. In these times, when nothing and no one offered any distraction, Maria was alone with her thoughts. Then it was when it was the hardest. She did not want to face the accusations coming from her conscience. Her heart was brutal now. Through the undulating image of the sunset filtering through the tears in her eyes, only one evil and cruel thought kept weighing down Maria's heart. She had been avoiding this notion for as long as possible, but now there was no power left to suppress it any more. With a labored breath, she uttered, "Did I fail them?" It was then she felt a hand on her shoulder. With her heart leaping through her throat and choking off her supply of air, a startled Maria all but exploded from her chair. With the agility of a gazelle, she leaped a matter of meters from her seat, only to discover the hand belonged to Diego, who had returned without her even seeing him. Even then, it took several moments until she began to collect herself and register that her husband was trying to say something. Her heart had been too loud in her ears to hear anything else. "I am sorry, my love, to have startled you," said Diego. "I was just trying to answer your question." Working hard to slow her breathing, Maria finally replied exasperatedly, "Question? What question?" "You asked, did I fail them?" Looking down to the ground, thinking back to a time seemingly long ago, when it was only a matter of seconds, Maria finally understood what Diego was saying. "Oh," was all she could reply. It wasn't a question she wished to answer because her condemning heart would only allow one response. As the blood gradually returned to her feet, Maria allowed herself to go back to where she had been reclining. Diego said something, but it hadn't registered. Nothing could stay the storm of emotions which seemed to define her. Diego shook her shoulder. "Maria," he demanded. She could not help but be annoyed now. Didn't he understand she was in pain? "Please, Diego, I cannot talk about the children again tonight. It just hurts too much." Through uncountable tears, she finally looked up at the face of Diego. It was only then she saw something completely out of place. A smile. Then it happened. Stepping out from behind Diego were two filthy, very scared boys looking up at their mother. Since this day, various people in the village have asked Maria how she felt and reacted when she first saw them. She always has a hard time replying because she just doesn't remember. Her only thought at that moment was to hold her babies and never let them go. Diego, on the other hand, remembers it perfectly. After waiting for Maria to calm down after seeing her boys, all but consigned to the fate of the grave, Diego related the course of events leading to the boys being found. On this day, Diego decided to follow the Guadiana River in a southerly direction. Secretly, Diego had come to the anguishing conclusion something terrible must have happened to the boys. With a heavy heart, he decided to follow the banks of the river. Thinking perhaps they had been swept under water by the current, he at least hoped to find their lifeless bodies somewhere on the shore of the river. Perhaps he would have something to bury. After traveling a half-day's journey, Diego spied a caravan traveling north along the river. Based on their garb, Diego immediately discerned these travelers were part of a group of people known as the Gitanos. Known as experienced musicians, the Gitanos were a group of people whom many regarded with derision. However, Diego never understood such nonsense. All Gitano people he had ever encountered were nothing but hospitable. Due in no small part to the proximity of Diego's farm to the river, word spread amongst the Gitano that Diego and Maria's farm was a much sought-after waypoint in their travels. It was widely known they could stay without being molested in any way. As the caravan came closer, his eyes seemed to be playing tricks on him. He could swear that two of the boys on a horse were his. He thought to himself how they couldn't be, since they were dressed in the traditional garb of the Gitano, including hand-woven cloth featuring various images of regional flora. When the caravan was close enough to recognize faces, the two boys saw Diego and dismounted with no small amount of enthusiasm. Running to their father, Hernan and Arturo literally knocked down both Diego and themselves, tumbling on top of their now sobbing father. After waiting for Diego to regain some semblance of composure, Hernan and Arturo began to relate the long, yet simple story of what happened. After being shooed away by their mother for having brought a mouse into the house, they decided to go down to the shore to watch the water go by. Having positioned themselves on the bank for about an hour, Arturo saw something floating by that looked exactly like a person with their head down in the water. He became very agitated and wanted to swim out to the body, But it was a dangerous area of the river where the current compressed from a wide meandering river to a passage about half the width. Such narrowing caused the river to become a swift passage of whitewater. Hernan strongly discouraged Arturo from swimming out to the body. However, as was typical with Arturo, he was not to be dissuaded from his goal. He reasoned that if it were someone they loved, someone would try to rescue their loved one. So Arturo took to the water. Everything was going fine, moving from one rock outcropping to another. He made it to the body, only to discover it was a uniquely shaped log floating by. Turning around, Arturo headed for shore. Just when he thought he had made it to safety, Arturo slipped on a rock slippery with moss and tumbled head over heels into the rapids. The current swept Arturo away, and without thinking, Hernan dove into the water to save his brother, unfortunately ending up in the same predicament. Serendipitously, that same log floated by the two boys, and each of them latched onto it for some semblance of safety. Holding onto it was a two-edged sword. Each time the boys tried to make for the shore, the rapids and other treacherous conditions caused them to return to the safety of their log life raft. After an hour or two of this ordeal, they situated themselves on a crook where a branch jutted out from the main trunk of the log. Being completely exhausted, they fell asleep and didn't wake up until the next morning, since the river that night was relatively calm, allowing them to sleep uninterrupted. When Arturo and Hernan finally awoke, they found the log was caught in some of the thrushes lining one side of the river. Climbing onto the shore, they realized they were nowhere near home. The caravan took the boys to the top of one hill near the river and revealed to them that, had the log not become caught on the shore, they would have been swept out to sea. Laying before them was the entirety of the Gulf of Cadiz, leading to the Atlantic Ocean. The caravan decided to take the boys back to their home, especially when they learned these boys belonged to Diego and Maria, a well-known couple amongst them. They didn't leave until the next day, and during the whole time, the boys couldn't tear themselves away from what they felt was the most beautiful sight they had ever seen, the sea. Something just seemed to click with them about that water, the sight, the smell, something. The rest is history. The boys traveled with the caravan along the river for about 5 days, until they met up with Diego, finally returning home to their mother. Needless to say, they were very content staying by their parents' side. Even so, the sight of the sea never left them.